Out of the dark waters of the Nile emerge 7 starving, diseased cattle. They drag themselves onto the muddy bank, hollowed out by hunger. The man trapped in this nightmare is Pharaoh, the absolute ruler of the known world. He wakes up terrified, completely helpless against a psychological threat he cannot understand. The terror immediately repeats in a second dream. Looking closely at carved stone reliefs like this one, we see the dense, healthy stalks of wheat that fueled the Egyptian empire. But in Pharaoh's vision, 7 withered, blasted stalks spring up from the dirt, devouring the healthy crops whole. The next morning, there is a total vacuum of competence at the highest levels of government. Pharaoh summons all the elite magicians and wise men of Egypt, but every single expert fails to decode the imagery. The state has no answers. Desperate for a solution, the royal court turns to a forgotten, foreign prisoner named Joseph. He has been languishing in a dungeon for years, but the chief butler remembers his unusual talent for interpreting dreams, and he is suddenly summoned as a last resort. The survival of the world's greatest superpower suddenly hinges entirely on an outsider's ability to solve an impossible riddle before the clock runs out. Joseph is hurriedly shaved, dressed in clean clothes, and pulled straight from the dungeon to the opulent throne room. He finds himself placed directly in front of the most powerful man on earth. This chart models a unified economic forecast. The dreams predict a massive 7-year upward trend in agricultural abundance, followed immediately by a sheer 7-year drop into total famine. The caveat: this collapse will completely erase any memory of the previous abundance. Joseph transitions instantly from a mere prophet to an elite state strategist. He delivers the horrific forecast and immediately pitches a massive crisis management protocol to survive it. The math of his survival plan is incredibly strict. The state must immediately centralize its authority and tax exactly 1/5, or 20%, of all agricultural output during the 7 boom years. To make the math work, Egypt will need massive logistical infrastructure. Joseph proposes the immediate construction of decentralized, heavily guarded urban silos across the entire empire to hold the taxed grain. In a single conversation, a foreign prisoner decodes an impossible riddle and pitches himself as the supreme architect of a national survival state. Pharaoh instantly recognizes the brilliance of the strategy. On the spot, he transfers absolute executive control of the Egyptian economy over to Joseph. Pharaoh physically seals this promotion by handing over his personal gold signet ring, an engraved piece of jewelry used for stamping official decrees, acting as the ruler's binding signature. By holding it, Joseph wields the ultimate instrument of ancient bureaucratic power. Joseph is publicly paraded before the citizens in a gleaming gold chariot like this one, cementing his staggering leap in social and political status. He is now the de facto prime minister of Egypt. The execution phase begins. The 7 years of plenty start exactly on schedule, and the Egyptian earth produces massive, staggering crop yields. Joseph's logistical operation runs flawlessly. He successfully gathers the 20% tax and stockpiles the grain in urban centers. Panning across the aerial view of these massive mud brick granary ruins gives us hard archaeological evidence of the sheer scale of ancient Egyptian state storage. They gather grains like sand until the volume becomes mathematically unquantifiable. By stockpiling millions of tons of food, Joseph weaponizes a period of immense wealth, converting a temporary agricultural surplus into an impenetrable shield against the coming Dark Age. The clock runs out. The 7 years of plenty abruptly end, and the global dearth strikes precisely as the models predicted. Looking at this ancient wall painting, we see Egyptian scribes meticulously calculating and recording harvest yields. This strict administrative control creates massive internal stability, standing in stark contrast to the starvation rapidly sweeping through the lands outside their borders. With the famine underway, Joseph executes the final phase of the plan. The state opens the heavily guarded storehouses and begins selling the stockpiled reserves back to the desperate population. This map of the ancient Near East shows the true geographic scale of the disaster. The famine is universal. With their own crops failing, desperate populations from all surrounding nations are forced to converge directly on Egypt to buy food to survive. The macroeconomic result is devastatingly effective. By controlling the only remaining food supply on Earth, Egypt systematically drains the wealth of the surrounding nations, centralizing absolute geopolitical dominance firmly into Pharaoh's hands. The greatest empire of the ancient world survived a total environmental collapse. They proved that true power is not found in magic or divine warnings, but in the foresight, audacity, and sheer logistical discipline required to prepare for the inevitable.